Welcome to Meaningful. Many of you know that I work with our Niagara Regional Police Service. They recently invited me to come play soccer with them. And I told them that I'm too good. Really, I won't be around, but I have to say something. We had a meeting on Monday, and this was about a program that we're trying to initiate in the Niagara region called the Situation Room. How many of you know of a situation room that's facilitated by your local government? So, essentially, most of the requests for emergency services, particularly to the police, are non-emergency requests. They can be triaged to other support groups. It could be a mental health support group. It could be a housing support group. And the implication of all of this is we tend to operate in crisis mode when really we can operate in circumstance mode. If everyone paused more, reflected more, got more organized, these are circumstances, and some are crisis. And I had shared with the presenters that this could save the region so much money so that they can do more of this. Now, relating this to Meaningful Mornings, sometimes our default is that everything is a crisis. If that's too strong of a sentiment, I'm confident that we all feel everything is urgent. That's why we have such a culture of texting and annoyance and so on. But if you pause and reflect and organize like we're trying to do in Meaningful Morning, what happens is you do seek the right support. And if you keep following the right support, your support will evolve to the trust triangle. I was sharing that recently in Boston about how when I'm going through a challenge, I try to facilitate this through self-therapy. That self-therapy is me having a conversation with my divinity, a dialogue with my guide. I don't have to open my mouth for that. And the evolution of your support going from an organization to the trust triangle is where you don't need support anymore. You actually become a supporter. Meaningful Morning is a crazy long investment. What we are doing is an experiment in long-term thinking that most of us are not used to. This is part of our trajectory where you don't need support anymore. Imagine 500 people became supporters. It would be awesome. This weekend, I'm speaking at an international summit on, my subject matter is, inspiring and grooming a new generation to lead nonprofits. inspiring and grooming a new generation to lead nonprofits. My first thought that I will share with all of the people that are there, particularly those who are younger, is to use your privilege. My parents are immigrants. When they shifted from a hemisphere into another, then they had to work to survive, and so they succeeded. Now I don't have to work to survive, so if I'm sensitive to what my parents have done for me, I will use this privilege of not needing to work for pleasure, possession, position, but rather to invoke and evoke peace. And for all who are not doing this, and this is a message to you, do you know the privilege you have? That for most of you, your parents created. Yesterday, I drove our kids to school in the morning, and there was a train in front of us, a recycling truck on the left, and a garbage truck on the right. And Chika was going, "We are the luckiest people." And he summed this up with, his exact words were, "We are as lucky as we are." And that is a really profound statement, which I don't think he meant to make, but if you think about it, you are as lucky as you're supposed to be. Use your privilege. And I'm connecting all of this to our grandparents. They lived for their country, that is Bharat, and they made this country free. Now what's next in line? To live for humanity. Bharat Mata ki Jai. Out of all of the verses in Bhagavad Gita, my personal observation on the most food-oriented verse is chapter 15, verse 14. We tend to make it chapter 4, verse 24, where we chant Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi, but I feel this is more direct. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Prana Pana Samayuktaha Pachamyannam Chaturvidham. And then we enter into the summary of this entire chapter. I'm going to share more about how important these verses are, 15 to 20, tomorrow. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishtaha matta smritirjnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarverahameva vedyaha vedanta krid veda videva chaham. This verse shows the vision of spirituality. Sarvasya hridi sannivishtaha, in all hearts. Smritihi jnanam apohanam, remembrance, learning, forgetting. This is all on account of my presence. Mattaha means coming from me. Aham means me. Shri Krishna is sharing here. He is divinity, and he is inside of us. He is us. In the language of the Upanishads, that is, Tvam Tat Asi. Vedanta Krit, Shri Krishna is the author of the Veda. Vedavit, Shri Krishna is the authority on the Veda. Therefore, Vedaihi Aham Vedya, he is authorizing us to use the Veda, to follow the Veda, to practice the Veda, to be divinity. He is the author, the authority, and authorizing us. He is sharing here, this has my stamp, my endorsement. Try to have more faith based on this statement. Verse 15 all the way to 20 of this chapter are some of the most potent verses in all of Sanatana Dharma. Verse 16. Dvavimau purushau loke ksharashchakshara eva cha ksharas sarvani bhutani utastokshara uchate. Joy. Dvau means two. Imau, these or here. Purushau, presences. Loke, this world. In our experience, there are two presences. What are these? And this will become more clear in the next verse. You will be confused with this verse. Tomorrow you will be clear. The two presences are creation and creator. Both are being described as Purusha or presence. Now, how do we reflect on this? The more you understand creation, the more you have to appreciate the Creator. If you don't appreciate the Creator, you've not understood creation. And what comes with this understanding and appreciation is humility. To not take for granted, to not have a sense of entitlement. All of chapter 10 was about that. You think you're great, there's a greater great, and beyond that, there's God. Humility. The names of these presences are Kshara and Akshara. Kshara we have already learned as perishing, and Akshara means imperishing. But don't take this in such a technical way. Here, Kshara means changing. Akshara, in this particular context, means changing less. Vivek did not say changeless. That's coming tomorrow. Changing less. Clear? There's changing, changing less, and then obviously the next presence will be the changeless. Now, an implication for all of us. Try to think of changing and changing less with the orientation of joy. Do you want your joy to change or to change less? Shall we ask each other, how many of you want your joy to change? Change less? Do you invest in the same way? Think in a rigorous way. Do you invest in the changing or the changing less more? And if you're investing in the changing more, your joy is going to be that. Why would it be otherwise? Ksharaha, the changing, sarvani bhutani. The changing is of the nature of all beings. I was trying to share with Vyasa yesterday. We had a really awesome independence celebration at our ashram in Niagara. I was cleaning outside and there was a dead mouse. A dead mouse, not dead mouse. Okay, he's also from the Niagara region for your reference. for those who know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so I was sharing with him that this mouse is going to decompose into soil and be in the ashram. And so he had so many questions about decomposing. And he said, am I decomposing? And I said, yes. Your decomposing is slower than my decomposing, but you are decomposing too. Do you need these 3 words to explain that to you? And so practically, in reference to all beings, our attachment to changing beings, which is felt as expectation, does not make sense. Why be attached to that which is changing? Why expect changing less from the changing? Kutastaha akshara uchyate, and that which is changing less, comparatively, is described as a kutastha, which means an anvil. I really like to think about this. So, have you all seen movies where they make swords on an anvil? Like Game of Thrones and all of those warrior movies. So an anvil is always described as not changing, but every time that hammer hits the anvil, it sort of is changing, correct? There's dents and there's scratches. So for us, what is more subtle than our attachment to beings is our attachment to our own equipment. With attachments to beings, we have expectations. With attachments to our own equipments, we have experiences, like this is my idea, or this was my memory, or that's going to be my dream. And so it is changing less, but it's still changing. So that attachment doesn't make sense either. In chapter 15, Sri Krishna's constant message to us is be deeper, be deeper, be deeper. And here he's so clear about this in verse 16 and 17. This is not even the finality. Lots to reflect on. So reflect. From inspiration to application. Your application yesterday was to help me prepare for my workshop on investing in emotional intelligence. How many of you thought about this? Too hard, right? You want to be part of this workshop. I'm going for a jog afterwards so I can prepare for this workshop. I have found long-term walking and jogging to be a great practice in reflecting, in preparing for this. But for all of you, many of you serve in the context of facilitating knowledge, study groups, Balivir classes. A gauge of if you're successful is if your students keep reflecting on what you taught in that session afterwards. In Sanskrit, it's called dhyana, to keep in mind. I'll share with you about my presentation tomorrow. Here's your application for this morning. I want you to prepare my presentation on inspiring and grooming a new generation in leading nonprofits. Come up with 3 main points that I should speak on. I've already shared the first, which is use your privilege. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Be joy.